morning, everyone. Welcome to the Rhodes weekly webinar. Today's topic is going to be the CSS framework and how to use the different functions of the new CSS in Rhodes 2.0. So we're going to start off by generating a simple app. So we'll do a Rhodes app, and we'll just call this one CSS. So it's going to go ahead and generate our app, and we'll also give our app just a generic model. So now we have an app. Let's go ahead and open it up in our editor and take a look at the CSS that is default shipped with here. The first thing that we're going to look at here is our layout file. The layout file is by default rendered on every view unless you specifically turn it off. And so the base layout file here has the title of your application in it. And then you can see these Ruby statements here, which are the statements that is detecting your platform and loading the proper CSS files for your platform. So if you had custom CSS and custom CSS for each platform, this is where you would put the loading of based on if you're running Apple, Android, BlackBerry, Windows Mobile. This is where you would put everything. So you can see if the platform is Apple, then it loads the WebKit CSS and the iPhone CSS file. If the platform is BlackBerry, it loads the BlackBerry CSS file. And if the platform is Android, then it loads WebKit CSS, Android CSS, and in all other cases it loads the Windows CSS file. And the final thing you see here is inside the body, this is where the content actually is placed from your views. So everything that you render in your views by default when using layout gets put between these two body tags. So next we'll look at basically the main page of your application and sort of the layout of the pages in a Rhodes app. This index action here is pretty simple. There's three main sections in every screen here. The first is a title, and you always have a div with the page title. The second is the toolbar, and that's in another div, and then the content. So if we look at the title here, you're always going to have your title in H1 tag, and that will display differently depending on which platform you're on based on the CSS files. So we'll go ahead and add our link to this model in our index. So we'll put a link to person, save that, and we'll go ahead and open this up here in iPhone and see how it looks on the iPhone first. And this is going to do the same build process you've seen before, building and running the application in the Xcode emulator, in the iPhone simulator. Is layout ERB the proper space to put any JavaScript libraries you want to include for different platforms? The answer for that is yes. If you're loading JavaScript libraries for every page and you want to do it for specific platforms, you would put it in the same place that the specific CSS file is loaded. And therefore, on every screen you will have your specific JavaScript loaded. So now that we have that built here, we'll take a look at the way the title looks. And so we'll go to our person model, and you see the title on the iPhone is centered here in the top toolbar area. We'll run the same thing for Android here. And so while that's building, I'm going to go ahead and copy our application onto our Windows machine here so we can see how that works as well. So we'll go ahead and open this up here. Make a new folder. Let's see. Call it CSS. And then we'll go ahead and copy over our old files here. So Android is still running. We'll take a look at that here. Our Android emulator should be just about ready here soon. So while that's loading, we can talk a little bit more about these different sections. So across all platforms will have these three sections: the title, the toolbar, and the content. The title on some platforms is not displayed, on other platforms it is. It depends on how the platform is laid out and how the view needs to look like. The toolbar is always displayed, and its view looks different for each platform. And the content is where all your main code goes. And what we're going to look at first here is Android, Windows Mobile, and iPhone, because they're all done very similarly, because their browsers that are built in that we use for our web UI views are much more advanced than what you would find on BlackBerry, and the styling is completely different. So after we go through Windows Mobile, Android, and iPhone, we'll then take a look at how BlackBerry is different and how you would accomplish the same things on your BlackBerry device. So looking here to our Android, this is now loaded here, and we'll go ahead and open that up and pull up our iPhone simulator here for comparison. So if we open up our person model here, you'll notice you do not see the title on Android, because on Android, the toolbar, the way the native toolbars are rendered, are up at the top, and you don't have the title there. So you can see the differences between the platforms. While it's still the same code, you still have slightly different views here. So with the toolbar, which is probably more interesting than just the title, because the title you pretty much have the option of putting a name here or not. The toolbar has buttons. You can have a left item, you can have a right item, and you can style the buttons differently. So on the toolbar here, we can see we have a regular button class. And so if we take a look at our iPhone page here, we can see a regular button is a square button, rounded corners, and is a medium blue shade. So we'll go ahead and change some of these up. And so your options here are, you can have no button, which will hide the button, a regular button, which gives you the blue rounded button on iPhone. You can have a back button, a blue button, and a delete button. So this home item will make this one a back button. So we'll take a look and see how that looks. We'll go ahead and open up our new view. So it has one that has a back button. We'll take a look at our edit view here. The edit view has a back button and a regular button for the delete action. So we'll change this one to our second option of delete. So we'll give that a delete button. And finally on show, there's an edit, so we'll change this one to a blue button so we can see how all of the various buttons look. So we'll go ahead and reload our application in our iPhone. While that's running, we'll take a look here at our Windows Mobile, which we had copied over previously. So actually, since we just made those changes, we'll go ahead and copy our files again. So we have the latest changes on our Windows version. So we just need our app folder here. So one important thing you want to notice is, you see I'm copying my application over across different VMs with different instances of gems and all that installed. So if you're working with an application and you need to move it to a new location, the first command you're going to need to run is set Rhodes SDK. The reason for this is when you build your application, it has a link to the SDK that you're using. So if we look at our build.yaml here, you can see at the top our SDK is pointing to library Ruby gems, which is our Mac version of the gems. We don't want to do that. We want to use what is on our Windows machine. So the gem comes with this command called set Rhodes SDK. So when you install the gem, this command is put on the path, and when you run it in your application, it uses where that gem is located to set your new location of the Rhodes SDK. So we'll go ahead and run that. And it'll go here for a minute, and then it tells us where it found the Rhodes SDK. And now if we take a look at our build YAML file, you can see it's been rewritten, and our SDK here is now correct for our Windows SDK. So once we've done that, we can say rake run wm-emu, which means run in the Windows Mobile emulator. And so that's going to call Visual Studio, and Visual Studio is going to build and fire up our Windows emulator. While that's loading, we'll take a look at how that rendered in our iPhone. So you see, when I go to my person model, we've changed our home to a back button. So instead of the square button like the new button, it now is this arrow button to indicate back. When we select new, we can see our canceled button is also the back button. So we'll go ahead and create a new person. Here's our blue button, which is the bright blue button that we had before. And then you can see our delete button, which is a lighter shade of gray. So we provide you with these various button types because the iPhone UI is typically a very graphical UI and has lots of transition and gradients on it, and just is very bubbly looking. We can compare that to an Android application, where we run an Android application. And the difference on an Android application is that the buttons on an Android application are typically all look the same. And so the way our new CSS layout is it makes all of the buttons fill up the toolbar and looks the same regardless of the button that you put in. And so your options on Android are no button or regular button, but if you have put in blue button, back button, or delete button, you will still get the standard button and it will not break. So once that's loading, while that's loading, we'll take a look at Windows Mobile. Go ahead and exit out of there. So ActiveSync is running. On Windows Mobile here, you can see it's a much simpler UI because of the capabilities that we have on Windows Mobile. You can see the toolbar here has the sync and login. If we go ahead and select our person, we can create a new person here. And if you notice, all of the buttons are the same. There is no button really in the Windows Mobile, there's just links that you select here. And so if we go look, we can see all of the links that we've put. Even though we put the different styles, it still has the same styling and looks like the Windows Mobile platform would. We can edit. Let's see, where did our Windows go? I think our Windows Mobile emulator has hanged here. Oh, there it was. Let's try this again. There we go. So you can see all the buttons are, even the delete button still looks like delete button. And you have the same paradigm here with Android where all of the buttons look very similar. If we open this up here, we can select our person here. We go to new, and you can see all the buttons are these square buttons that fill up the entire space. And so by default on Android, when you create a button, it fills up basically however much room you can take on either side. So we can add a person here. And regardless of the various stylings that we had used for iPhone, we still have the Android looking buttons. So that's how our toolbar styling is done. It's pretty simple. Moving forward, we're going to talk about now the content section. And the content section is where you're going to be spending most of your time when you're writing an application. So we'll go back to our editor here. And we'll go to our index page. Question is here, could we apply this CSS locally in the different ERB files? Yes, you can do that as well. Instead of having all the CSS in the layout, if you decide that one page should have a different one, you would just take the code out of the layout here. So if we take a look at our layout ERB, you would just remove the CSS from the layout and put the CSS includes here inside your pages. So for our content, the way that it works is that your content is a list of items, usually links, input buttons, various form items. So we'll go to our main index page here and we'll add a few different kinds of links. You can see inside the content we already have a UL here. And inside that we have our list items. So on Android, Windows Mobile, and iPhone you have the list items here. And BlackBerry you have equivalent of a list item, but it's not implemented with a list item. And so we'll go over BlackBerry's differences after we finish these first three platforms. So inside your list you can have a link, which is your anchor tag. And the way you do it is you have two spans in there. One that is the name on your link, and then a second optional span which gives a disclosure indicator on the iPhone. And so there's two types. There's a disclosure indicator and there's a detailed disclosure. So we'll go ahead and copy this list item here, and we'll just duplicate that. And we'll change this disclosure indicator to a detailed disclosure. Let's see, a couple of questions coming in here. Do we need to worry about compressing CSS and JavaScript or stuff, or is that done when the app is compiled? So all your CSS and JavaScript is included with your application. You don't have to worry about it. All you need to do is put it in the public folder, which is where all of the static resources are stored. Another question is, can we expand the context by adding other sections like content 1, content 2, etc.? So the way our CSS is done is that there's pretty much one main content section. So if you want to have other sections, you would just put another list item here, or another unordered list. And so that would give you another section within your main page. Some other things you can do here in the list item. You can have, let's see, we'll give a copy here. You can have a name value pair, which is basically a labeled item. So that's accomplished by having, let's see, that's here, two divs here. So we'll have a div and give that a class of item label, and we'll just call this label. And then we have another one, we'll call this item value, and that's the value. So we'll go ahead and save that, and we'll run this on iPhone and take a look at how iPhone looks. So you see the changes that we've added here. We have our standard disclosure indicator, which is a gray arrow, a detail disclosure, which is a blue and white arrow here, and we can see our key value or labels and value here that we put in. So we'll take a look at how this looks on Android as well. Okay, so now it says it's been loaded in our emulator, so we'll go ahead and reopen our application. So you can see the disclosure indicators on the Android platform don't show up, but we still also have our label value pairs here. And we can do the same on Windows Mobile. We'll go ahead and copy over our app folder again. So one thing here it said is unable to open the target files, unable to copy it, please stop the application on the device and try again. So I'll just go ahead and exit the emulator and then rerun the process here. So go ahead and loading in the Windows Mobile emulator. Files are being copied here. Close out that. So we can see our links here and our label value item here. And so those are the main things that you can do on just on the list outside of a form. You can also put in an unclassed div or span, and that will just output the text on a line. And you can also put buttons outside of your list and that show up as a button you can select to do things. So the next main portion of the CSS is forms. So if we go back to our iPhone simulator here, when we go to our person class and go to create a new person, it shows us a form. If we also take a look here, we can look at the way it looks here on Android. So we'll select person here and go to new, and it shows me a form. One second here. Okay, so you can see on the different platforms here the way your basic new form looks. Let me open up all three here at once so you can sort of see them side by side. iPhone. So you can see it's the same page, but on the iPhone it looks in the iPhone right here. In the Windows Mobile, you have the Windows looking form here. And on Android looks like Android. But by default, the only type of text inputs that are generated when you generate a new model are just standard text inputs. And standard text inputs are okay, but we also have the ability to do things like checkboxes, radio, select, and we have the styling for those. So we're going to go ahead and edit our new page here, and we'll add all different kinds of form elements so we can see how the form elements look in each platforms.